Coming up on today's Locked On Bucks, we recap the weekend, how the Bucks keep getting themselves in these situations where it comes down to the last 2-minute report. But another controversial ending over the weekend in Charlotte. We take a look back at that, the reaction from Doc Rivers, and the direction that this team appears to be headed in. Oh, by the way, previewing another tough matchup tonight with the Houston Rockets. We get into that conversation next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We, of course, thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen each and every day. And thank you for checking out the Locked On Bucks newsletter as well. That's right. Your favorite podcast is now a newsletter delivered directly to your inbox for free each and every morning, breaking down the latest news around the NBA and, of course, with your Milwaukee Bucks, your ultimate one-stop shop for team and league coverage. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That is lockedondaily.com to start your day with the all-new free Locked On Bucks newsletter. So, Camille, man, how do the Bucks keep getting into these spots? I would assume by now everybody is familiar with what we're talking about. So which one was more egregious to you? The call that sent Ron Holland to the free throw line or the call that sent LaMelo Ball to the free throw line?
Honestly, the call that sent Ron Holland to the line was more egregious. It's just the fact that Ron Holland didn't miss both free throws. The Bucks were able to find a way to win, so you don't harp on that as much. Meanwhile, in this Hornets game, you end up losing the game. So it's one thing that you kind of go back to of like, if they would have just gotten the call right, we wouldn't be here. But honestly, just 2 straight games of just mistakes by the referees at the end of the game that really could have hurt the Bucks. Well, and it did against the Hornets.
Yeah, I mean, that one to me, the Ron Holland one was like, what? How do you call this? Especially with the time that was left on the clock, there was nothing that seemed out of the extraordinary in terms of the physicality of that challenge. Mm-hmm. And then for it to happen again, we were talking before we started recording, and to be clear, this isn't the reason the Bucks lost. As you know, I think we'll get to. There are some things that still need to pop up, but we did see closer to 48 minutes of basketball, which is one of the bigger things that we were asking for. But, you know, you and I were talking about that play against LaMelo, and I think the part that sucks about it the most is you did everything, like everything that led up to that was what you would want to see. I think the way that Doc Rivers managed the game the last 2 minutes or so, when we started to see more on-off substitutions for that specific play too. Okay, let's go to the defensive group, which again, most coaches are going to do, but this is the progress that we need to see.
Yeah.
And the way they defended it too, where you just blitzed LaMelo Ball immediately to say somebody else is going to beat us. It ain't going to be you. All of it. And then for it to end like that, you were just thinking, man, so they did have time left. And that's, I think, the other hot button issue. LaMelo Ball hits both free throws. Then you got 7 seconds left. And with the guys that were unavailable, we knew where this was going. But I've seen a lot, too, of why do you settle for that shot in the final 5 seconds of the game?
Settle, I understand why people are coming at it that way. Settle, it's like Giannis. You are Giannis. You are somebody who we know is a dominant force at the rim. Find a way to get there over and over. I get that. But honestly, Giannis had the discretion to do what he felt was going to be best in that moment. He had the ball with the last seconds ticking. They cleared out for him. It was all going to be his decision and what he felt was going to be right now. Throughout the second half, you did see the Hornets conceding that mid-range shot to him. Like, if this is what you want, you can have it, but we're going to make sure that we get back. So he had space throughout the second half, and the shot wasn't falling as consistent for him in the second half as it was in the first half. But I don't think that makes it a bad look for Giannis. Like, we've seen him and how much work he's been putting on that mid-range. It was an open look for him. And again, it was at his discretion of what he wanted to do to try to win the game. So I'm not mad at the shot selection from Giannis at the end there. Like, we've talked about the mid-range game for him, the numbers behind it this season, how they've been improved for him. So I'm not mad at the shot selection. And for those who think like it was Doc Rivers, like go and take this shot, like it was just clear out, yet let Giannis figure out what he wants to do and then let him do it.
I didn't have a problem with it either. He was 5 of 7 from those spots to start the game. He did miss his last 3 prior to that, but what he had in the first half, what we saw against the Pistons, too, I didn't have a problem with the shot selection on that. I did wonder. So there was the foul, and I did wonder when we immediately saw Giannis as the inbound man, as the trigger man. Oh, are we going to do something where you try to suck away some of the attention and get Giannis to dart baseline and get an open look there of him cutting to the basket? But I think what they did, and again, it kind of speaks to what you were missing in terms of your shot creators and makers in those spots. Dame and Khris have a history of making tough shots. You would have loved to have at least one of those guys on the floor, but you just didn't. And it goes back to before the game, Doc Rivers mentioning too, the tough part, I'm not saying feel sorry for us, but the tough part about this, any coach would tell you, if you are going to deal with injuries, you do not want your guys that are point guards, and you do not want your guys that are the ball handlers and guys that are going to set other people up. And that's what we're down right now with Dame, Ryan Rollins, and of course, Khris Middleton.
Yeah, and that changes the effect of the game. Like it was interesting watching the Hornets game because we saw against the Pistons, it was a lot of Giannis, 59 points. He was doing his thing. And in this game, it was like he had a lot more help. Against the Pistons, it was like him and Brook were the main offensive heavyweights. And in this game, you had quite a few different guys in double figures. You had a season high
season highs.
Torian Prince, from Bobby Portis tied his season high.
Ajax,
which actually I think 14 might be his career high as well at this point in his short NBA career, but season high for him at this point as well. So you had some other guys stepping up, and that's what makes that last play with the phantom call on Melo suck even more. It's like you had some really good offensive games from some other guys, Torian Prince, Ajax, Bobby Portis, to go along with Giannis did a triple-double in the third quarter. And it's sad to see those performances go to waste, so to speak, in a loss. But I do think that you can build from some of the things that we saw from those players in the upcoming games going forward. But I can't believe they called that call. And honestly, the way that Doc responded in the presser, I was here for it. Giannis didn't want to touch it, but like I'm glad that somebody said something.
So I do want to get to those comments and just the direction this team appears to be headed in after our break here. To finish off your point, it is a career high for Andre Jackson. I could have sworn he had one other game close to this last year, but no. It is only the third time in his career he has scored in double figures in a game in 14, a new career high for Ajax. So those comments you alluded to from Doc Rivers about the officiating and about the whistle that Giannis gets, I think many would say long overdue, but Doc Rivers finally delivered it. And you could tell as soon as he didn't even need any prompting on the question. It was, I'm ready to get fined. Let's do this. So we'll get into those comments and some numbers to share about the Bucks in November coming up after the break here on Locked On Bucks. This next segment of Locked On Bucks is sponsored by BetterHelp, as we're in November, the month all about gratitude. And along with the person that you want to shout out with your gratitude, there's another person you should be thinking of, and that is yourself. It's sometimes hard to remind ourselves we're trying our best to make sense of everything. And in this crazy world, that is not always easy. So here's a reminder to send some thanks to the people in your life, including yourself. If you are thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It is entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get started. From there, you get matched with a licensed therapist and can even switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today and get 10% off your first month. It's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, so Camille, the Doc Rivers comments after the game. Yeah, I think that's what we all came here for. But so I transcribe all coach notes for every single game. So I have that to look back on during the game when we're doing work and afterwards too, when we do this and post-game shows, to have those to look back on. And with this one, it was like 2 paragraphs where you're like, oh man, he's still going and trying to keep up with it. So, he answered the question immediately about the last shot, and you could tell it was, yeah, I'm cool with it. Anyway, here's what I want to talk about, and just pushed it to the side. This is back-to-back games where an incorrect call is made on the final play. LaMelo Ball fell down. He just fell down. He slipped on his own. We come up with the ball, and the game is over. It's back-to-back games now. We have had a call go against us that was incorrect. We were lucky Detroit missed 2 free throws. Tonight, LaMelo Ball made them. When you watch the play, the ref that made the call was blocked out. Guys play too hard. You can't guess on these calls. And then he went off on the free throws too, which I didn't have as much of a problem with. His overall point is the one that should stick of,
Right.
Giannis took 1 free throw in this game. Like, we're sending LaMelo Ball to the free throw line 11 times. Giannis took 1. I think a product of some of the Bucks' light volume in free throws in that game was how they were playing. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. There was a lot of ball movement. They were, touching the paint and kicking the ball out. 31 assists was a new season high for this team. So I think that was a lot of it. I know they scored 50 points in the paint, but I think most of it was just, they were playing pretty connected and on the perimeter, that there wasn't a lot of those spots for fouls, but for Giannis. And I didn't think it was too egregious, but late in the game, that dunk that Giannis had
That's
too.
the one that stands out to me too.
And you were like, I feel like he was, first of all, touched by Brandon Miller and then close to the rim as well. Like, how is that not an and one opportunity? And Doc specifically singled that out as well. Giannis was fouled by every player on the team on his way down the floor. We don't get an and one. So Doc Rivers is going to be fine. But these are the things, and we would see Bud do this occasionally too. You have to pick your spots. You can't just do it every single game and be the Daryl Morey type. That's, well, we actually petitioned the league that we should have won the game because of this. Like, you have to be judicious with it. And I think that's what Doc Rivers is doing. And I think he's doing it at the right time. Is this team has started to find a spark, and maybe this is something else.
It is. And to your point about Doc, like, he definitely had to pick his spots, and this was a great time to pick one. Again, this was a Bucks team that, as we've talked about, they've started the season in a way that no one expected. They won their last 2 games before that Hornets game. They were in a position to have won their 3rd straight game and continue the momentum that they've been building over the last week or so into the right direction, and keep that snowball and keep moving up the standings and just keep trying to dig themselves out of that hole. So for it to come down to a phantom call at the end there, it's disappointing. It's really disappointing. So for Doc to go out there and show that fire for his team, I think it was a well-placed spot, because to your point, you don't want coaches doing that all the time. It takes something away from it. It's like if you're a wrestling fan and you watch a product and it's like, they used to be blood and stuff. And it's like, okay, if you see it too often, it's not special anymore.
Are you singling anyone out particularly?
Listen, if a certain, corporation company is your cup of tea that engages in that more often, that's on you. But there's something to say about less is more and just picking your spots. And I love that Doc did that after this game because it was a really hard fought game for the Milwaukee Bucks, the shorthanded Bucks again, without Dame, without Rollins, without Khris. Getting Bobby back was a boom offensively a bit for him, but still, like, this was a difficult game on the road for the team. So to lose in the way that they did with the effort that they gave, I'm so happy that Doc took the moment to be like, you know what? Bring this final on. I want it. Like, they're going to hear what I got to say right now.
The free throws were 21-11 in a game where Giannis played. Giannis took just 1 free throw. On that dunk, the whole team fouled him. He was in the paint the whole night. Someone explained to me how Giannis gets 1 free throw. But more importantly, through all of that, it comes down to 2 teams that were playing hard. On that last play, we got the switch we wanted. We got one of the best defenders in the league onto LaMelo Ball, and we call a phantom foul. These mistakes can't happen. I wouldn't be frustrated if it was just today, but this is now back-to-back games. So, yeah, I mean, you could see the visible frustration in Doc Rivers as well. And I do wonder if I know he says I wouldn't be as frustrated. I'm sure he wouldn't be as frustrated if that didn't happen Wednesday in Detroit. But if you still won that game and that didn't happen in Detroit, if we still see this outburst, if everything plays out the same, because it is something to monitor with this team. I think Giannis has done a good job of getting to the free throw line, even dating back to that. And Doc himself, as we mentioned, said he didn't have a problem with that shot.
Mhm.
Even going back to that shot, though, and put it, drive to the basket. All right. I mean, Giannis has been okay with that spot, and he's been hot lately, and that's a spot that's going to be important for him. So I don't mind him taking that. Then I suppose also part of it is the math of, would you rather Giannis take that shot, which, the last 2 games he's hit fairly consistently, or would you rather have Giannis go to the free throw line and hit 2 free throws to win it, or at least one of 2 to tie it?
Yeah, I trust Giannis with the free throws.
Trust him in those spots.
Yeah, so in those spots, I do trust him to knock him down. So I wouldn't have had a problem with him going to the line, especially because the Bucks were down by 1. So even if he missed one, the worst case scenario in that situation is you go to overtime, you play another 5 minutes. It's a chance that he could have missed both. But again, normally in those situations, when it's all on the line, Giannis tends to be pretty reliable. But again, the mid-range shot that he took, I thought it was a good look for him. Some might argue, by the way, that he set it up with, the dribbling doing tween, trying to get his rhythm before he pulled it. But again, when you're thinking about Giannis's game and who he is as a player and how he's grown, the NBA just recently put out, after he dropped 59 the other night, all 9 of his 50-plus scoring games in the regular season. Just an hour long on YouTube, the highlights from all 9 of those games. And going back and rewatching it, you see okay, well, his first 50-point game in the regular season was back in 19. So that's 5 years ago.
Yeah.
To see the way that he got to 50 then and seeing the way that he got to 59 this last week, still a lot in the paint. But younger Giannis, we know he was trying to dunk everything all the time. And even seeing his jump hook when he was younger, it just looked, it wasn't as smooth as it is now. So he's been putting in so much work to diversify his game. And as he continues to get older, he is going to have to add to his game. We see it with players all the time. You can look at LeBron, somebody who did not have a reliable 3-point shot until he got a bit older. You have to add to your game. And for years, we thought with Giannis, he needs to shoot threes. But if Giannis can get a good mid-range game going for him, I think that can open up a lot for him in the way that people thought that a 3-point could for him years ago. So again, he's going to have to take those shots to continue to get better at him. I'm not mad at it at all. And if we look back on this in a few years and it's hey, look at what he is now from this area of the floor, as we can see the growth happening for him, he's going to have to work on his game. We know he practiced. He doesn't take shots. He doesn't practice. And in the game, I'm not mad at that. I'm here for it. I'm here for it. And to that point, before we wrap this up in this segment, hearing the Charlotte Hornets commentators throughout the game, when Giannis took that last shot, they yelled great defense. They were that's the shot you want him to take, which again, I understand, especially if you don't watch the Bucks regularly and understand that that's becoming a part of his game. But they also knew that LaMelo wasn't fouled either. They were yelling he got tripped by his own Pumas. And that's it. They knew and
pointed out it's good to have a superstar. Yeah.
Right. So it is what it is. It's unfortunate for the Bucks, and that's why it sucks. But nothing that you can change about. Even though the NBA came out and said, yeah, it wasn't a foul, doesn't change the outcome of the game for us. So you take it, you move on, and you try to get better going forward.
All right. We got some numbers to share for November and what we've seen from this team, and why yesterday overall I felt really good about where the Bucks are at right now, all things considered, not in a vacuum with a 4-9 record, but what we've started to see them build here. I feel pretty good leaving yesterday's game for some reasons we'll get into, some numbers to share, and we'll talk a little NBA Cup standings, as the Bucks have this rarity of 2 straight Cup days that they're not going to be playing, not in the group play until next Friday against the Pacers, but they're in an interesting spot in their group. So we'll dig into that conversation coming up after this on Locked On Bucks. Time to talk to you about our friends over at FanDuel as we get ready to tackle the NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right. So I mentioned I left that game actually feeling good. And I was talking about this with someone else who will remain unnamed. Those are spots that the Bucks, not only lose, but you look back at the Knicks game, the Grizzlies game, the Nets game, like all the makings were there for the Bucks to be run off the floor in the first quarter. No point guard play, a young athletic team that you're going to have, an early tip off. Like, I think everybody was kind of preparing themselves for, man, this could be another like 128 to 106 game here. And that's not what we got. From the tip, this team was relatively locked in. There are some things that kind of popped up. You mentioned that we'll get to here, but it was a competitive game back and forth throughout. And, all of they beat the Pistons, they beat the Raptors. You're in these close games with the Hornets, save for the Raptors. Both of those teams are better this year. The Boston Celtics just went to overtime with the Raptors last night. So this stuff happens in the NBA. It is about, defense and depth. If you have those two things, you're going to win a lot of games in the regular season. It's just sorting it out in the postseason. And the Bucks don't have those things. So there's going to be some adventures along the way. But coming off those 2 straight wins, not having any of those moments where Charlotte was just, here's the run, and here's where the transition defense fails us, or here's where this happens, here's where the opponent gets loose for threes. That didn't happen. Even moments where the Hornets would go on, I think there was 1 7-0 run, and we saw Doc Rivers immediately timeout. This isn't going from a 2-point lead for us to a 13-point deficit. So I think that in itself was a huge step in the right direction. I have some numbers too, but before we share those, did you have some of those similar thoughts, or what were your thoughts leaving that game yesterday?
For the most part, I thought they played a pretty solid game. The only area for the Bucks that I was like, I hate seeing this rear its head again, was just allowing too many offensive rebounds. The Hornets were able to get second, third, sometimes fourth chances on a possession. And again, when you think about a game that came down to you lost by 1 point, it's like if you could have ended one of those possessions earlier where they got second chance opportunities, just one of the many that they had, it's a different game. So that's an area where the Bucks were showing improvement. We know that, grabbing those defensive rebounds, boxing out can be a problem for this Milwaukee Bucks team. And it was looking like they were cleaning that up a bit. So that was the aspect of the game for me where I was just like, I need y'all to tighten up, especially knowing that Monday night, tonight, whenever you listen to this, they're playing the Houston Rockets, a team that leads the league in offensive rebounding percentage. Like, they are a team that is going after that offensive glass. So you are going to have to box out. You are going to have to make sure that you're rewarding your good defense by actually ending the possession with a defensive rebound, because it doesn't really matter how good the defense was in that possession if you don't end it. So they have to find ways to end those possessions. But outside of the offensive rebounding for the Bucks, I was all right with just about everything else. I love the job that they did defensively on LaMelo. He's somebody who tends to get loose against the Bucks. I will live with the fact that he had 26 on 20 shots.
I think, yeah.
That's fine. Shout out to Andre Jackson Jr., who did a really good job on him throughout the game. But yeah, other than the offensive rebounding for the Hornets, I was pretty cool with the game flow.
26 on 20 shots, but 15 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah,
it was where
a lot of free throws too.
Yeah, 5 of those 11 free throws came in the fourth quarter, so that was part of it. But yeah, I mean, look, I know 4-9 is disappointing. It's not what any of us envisioned. It's Doc Rivers himself said we did not anticipate to have this record. I don't know what the record we anticipated to have, but it wasn't this. But he continues to say, I see it. It's coming together. And games like this are where I think it's easier to buy into that. Yeah, I can see that, like to be down everything you were down in the areas you don't want to be down those things. Like they win this game if Damian Lillard plays. They win this game even if they have Ryan Rollins and somebody else
Yeah.
that they can just throw out there on the perimeter and maybe knock down some shots. So it is, I feel, moving in the right direction here. And I think it's really now just looking at, so I'm going to share some numbers that go against this, but I think looking at the start of these home games from that point forward, just to track, did this lift them, right? Like the opponents that they had and the fact that it's a majority of those games throughout November at home, like, was this what started to lift this group? And we're seeing the metrics advance for them from this point forward, because where I said I'm going to go against this is just going a few days prior to that. But if we just look at November as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
the Bucks are 3-5, but their defense right now in the month of November in those 8 games, which is a small sample, but still, is 10th best in the league. And it is less than 1 point per 100 possessions away from the Boston Celtics for 9. Like defensively, you and I have talked about this a number of times already. The telltale sign to me of people who are just looking at box scores and looking at the standings to say, oh, well, Bucks are still a disaster because of their defense, is the ones that mention that. Their defense is not the reason why this team is 3-5 in November. Their defense is not the reason they're 4-9 overall. I mean, part of it earlier, sure.
Mm-hmm.
But the defense has kept you in games and has done enough to win games for you. And again, 10th best in the month of November. Like, if you can get even a 12 or a 13th rated defense, that is going to be huge for this team. The issues have been offensive. And, part of that is no Khris Middleton. Part of that is 3 straight games with no Dame.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is 2 straight games with DeLon Wright as the only point guard that you've had available to you. The offense is where the issue has been. But I think we're all assuming, when they're healthy and when they get this, time together, the pieces that we've seen from young guys, like, I'm not worried about the offense. It's going to be fine. It's the defense. Well, we're starting to see that baseline of the defense has been good enough. So to me, that's the other thing I leave very encouraged with. Yeah, it's not a great offensive rating in the month of November. It is, let's see, I think they were close to 20th, 17th in offensive rating in the month of November, but 10th best defensively. And that's the other thing I'll point out before I get your thoughts. I mentioned it's a small sample size, and a lot of times with that, you can point to, it's X amount of games and they played these terrible teams. So, of course, it's also not the case. Like when we talk about these 8 games, 4 of them are against 3 of the top 4 offenses in the league. So it's not like they've just played tomato cans. They played some good offenses, and overall, they've been 10th best in the league.
Well, yeah, that defense has been showing up for him. And again, it's finding the right pieces to put into the rotation for the Bucks. We've talked about the contributions of Andre Jackson Jr. to the lineup and getting regular rotation minutes. When Ryan Rollins was healthy and seeing like, okay, I can see the defensive potential of Rollins being 6'3", with that super long 6'10" wingspan and what he can do when he's on the court defensively. We've seen Giannis even play with more defensive focus than we did at times earlier in the season. You've seen Brook Lopez taking up another level. You have been seeing guys defensively put it together. But as we've mentioned, the way that this team is constructed, a lot of the offense was always planned to come from Dame, from Giannis, and from Khris. And if you're without those top guys, the flow looks a little bit different for them. And again, too, this is an offense that's also having to figure out how to play together with some of the new additions and figuring out when they have their shots. I thought they did a better job as well against the Hornets of not hesitating as much when a shot is available to them. Just take it and go. Andre Jackson Jr. was one in particular. He had to play earlier in the dunker spot where he tried to pass out of it and it was a turnover, but then you saw him go up. You saw him get to the free throw line. You saw him take like a little step back 3. Like you saw him being a little bit more aggressive as the game went on. And I think one thing that is going to be beneficial for the Bucks going through this early injury section of the season for him, which I'm hoping is the only injury section for the Bucks this season, knock on wood. It's just that guys are getting an opportunity to have the ball in their hands a bit more, opportunity to work on their game and get a little bit more comfortable, get that rhythm. Like Taurean Prince is someone I really would love to highlight, just given the fact that he took to heart what Doc said about, hey, doesn't have to all be threes. Like there are a lot of driving lanes out there available for you. Take them, use them.
Doc did also say, all right, not as many as you're taking.
Because he's shooting so well from three too. You don't want him to not be shooting from three, but just being able to mix up that offensive game a bit more for him. So seeing him do that, seeing someone like Andre, even DeLon Wright, he missed a lot of shots against the Hornets, but I'm glad that he was taking the shots because he's someone as well who's been a little hesitant to shoot. So like offensively, it's still a work in progress, but you can see again, when Dame comes back, when Khris is healthy, when Giannis is there, even if it's just when Dame and Giannis are in the lineup, just finding those ways to use them to generate that offense. I think that's something else you could have saw over the last few games without Dame. It's just how Giannis had to use his gravity even more to try to open up things for his teammates, which is the case when Dame's on the court as well. And we've seen Dame be somebody who, like, he finds guys, he looks for them as well. So just them understanding too how the ball should be moving. They got a lot of tape to look at, which I think is going to be good for them going forward offensively as well.
Yeah, and I think one other piece of context to point out defensively, for the season as a whole, the Bucks are second to last in efficiency with their defense in transition, trailing only the Utah Jazz, and it's a pretty wide gap. The Jazz have far and away been the worst team at transition defense in the league. So they're 29th in defensive efficiency. They're in the middle of the pack. I think it was 16th in frequency that opponent gets into those situations. So like that was one of the things we saw from the moment Doc Rivers arrived, that the volume of transition attempts by the opponents was reduced significantly with Doc in place here. In this same sample size that we're talking about of the month of November, the Bucks defense in transition is 17th in defensive efficiency and still in the same place, 17th in frequency. So they're still allowing the same amount of opportunities, which is the middle of the pack. It's not an outlier good. It's not where it was a year ago in the bad, but they're doing a much better job of defending in those spots. And look, for a team that's constructed like the Bucks with the two bigs and the age of a lot of these guys, if you're going to finish 15, 16, 17, like cool. I'm more than fine with that. If that's what you're giving up on the transition end defensively, now anchor your half court offense or defense. And that's what we've really seen from this group. So later on tonight, Monday night, the Houston Rockets come to town. You mentioned some of their strengths and what they look to do. It's another young athletic team that is playing incredibly well, are the Rockets. Like at one point for a long stretch, they were among those teams that, and I'm trying to see if this is still the case. It is not. But for a while, they were in the top 10 in offense and defense. They have the third best defense in the league and fifth in net rating. They just got a lot of guys that they can throw at you, and it's going to be interesting to see. I'm assuming Tari Eason is going to take the Giannis assignment, so to watch that. They take a lot of mid-range shots too, which we've seen the Bucks not full-on drop, but moving closer to that. So it's going to be interesting to see what this defense is able to do against the Rockets. I think the good piece of news for Bucks fans is three-point shooting is not their thing. And I know before the game against the Hornets, we said, hey, they take a lot of threes. They don't hit a high rate, but they take a lot, and they play the math game. And especially guys like Josh Green in the corners, look out for that. And we saw Josh Green 2 early corner threes, but from that point forward, the Bucks did a better job. Your test is going to be more in transition and in those mid-range spots here against this Rockets team. Like if they're knocking down threes and getting good looks, something went drastically wrong with the way that this Houston Rockets offense is constructed.
Yeah, absolutely. So post game is going to be really interesting to do after that one, because going into it, just to sum it up, looking to see how the Bucks respond to the Rockets in transition, looking to see how the Bucks can keep the Rockets off the offensive glass, because again, that's an area that they do really, really well in. And then just seeing how they keep up with another younger athletic team and the pace of that game. And honestly, to see what that injury report is going to look like for the Bucks and who they're going to have available in this game. Is Dame back? Is Rollins back? We'll have to see. I'm not even going to say Khris's name at this point, because listen, when we know, y'all will know, we'll all know together. But right now, we're just going to keep on trucking like, he's out for, the moment. But just seeing who the Bucks have available, how they're able to handle another young team. I think the Rockets are third in the West right now as well. So yeah, it's a Rockets team that has a lot of confidence right now. A Rockets team that is going to be coming in and ready to try to make some noise and continue what they have going on. Like, I think it was Giannis saying, no team's going to feel bad for us in our record. We got to go out there and take wins. So I'm hoping this is a game where the Bucks can come out, pull off an upset at this point, and knock the Rockets off.
Rockets third in the West at 9-4. So the inverse of the Bucks, and the West, the inverse of the East, is they have 9 teams above 500. The East still stuck at 3 with the Cavs, the Celtics, and the Magic. We can get much more into it on Friday's show when that's the return of the NBA Cup. But Bucks currently lead their group in point differential. Camille, depending on the results Friday with the Bucks and the Pacers, this might come down to the Bucks and the Pistons in that game in Detroit to determine who wins Group B in the Eastern Conference. Wouldn't that be something if it's down to the Bucks and the Pistons this time? Bucks and the Rockets coming up later tonight, Monday night, depending on when you listen to this. We will, of course, have the game recap, the post-game pod on that one. And again, start to dig into the NBA Cup as we got another one of those Friday night here in Milwaukee. That'll do it for today's show, though. For Camille, I'm Justin. We will talk to you once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.